Hello and welcome to It's Time for Yarn. Today we are going to be learning how to take the Red Heart Granny Square yarn and make it into an Argyle color pulling blanket. Now I do have to say that the color sequences in this yarn are pretty long, so you will have quite a large blanket by the time you're finished. So keep that in mind. It is a little bit of an investment for yarn, but for me, someone who loves this kind of crochet, it's worth it. So I also want to say that I have a more relaxed style towards color pulling, so I am perfectly okay with adding a stitch here or dropping a stitch there in order to make the color control work out. So I just wanted to throw that out there for you so you don't get knee deep in this project and be kind of frustrated with my style. Hopefully you'll enjoy it though and be able to find success with color pulling. If you're interested in purchasing this yarn, if you haven't done it yet, I do have a link with your inspiration, so I will be adding that down below if you're interested. Check that out and support me if you can. If not, no worries. Now, I am going to use Red Heart in black hyperviolet, and I'm going to be using a size K 6.5mm hook to get started. Now, before I begin, I am going to use the granny stitch, and because of that, I'm going to make a chain, an open-ended chain in my border color. For me, I'm going to make black the border, so I started a chain here to get me going. I will build my granny stitches in this chain, and when I get to the end here, I will add on more chains as I go. I don't know how many I'm going to need because when I first start, I don't know how many clusters per color I'm going to make. So to kind of troubleshoot that, I make a chain and leave it open-ended and add on stitches as I go. And once I get to the end, I just unravel what I don't need and snip it off, and we're good to go. So get your yarn, get your border color, and start your chain, and let's get going. All right, so let's dive in. I've got my chain ready. I'm starting on the end with the knot in it. Got my K hook ready. You might need a different size hook depending on your gauge and the way you crochet. That's perfectly fine. Make the adjustments that you need in order to be successful. For me, in this project, in the first color, I'm going to have 5 clusters, color 2, 9 clusters, color 3, 13 clusters, color 4, 16 clusters, and color 5, I'm going to have 19 clusters on the first row, plus 1 more to begin my second row. And that will help me set up my diagonal for color pulling. So again, I'll say that on the last color, it's the longest sequence. I'm going to have 19 clusters on the first row, and then I'm going to have the 20th cluster as my first stitch in the second row. All right, now this yarn is designed to make granny squares that you don't have to change yarn for, and in the design instructions it only allows for a 4-inch tail when you are beginning to make your granny square. So I'm going to keep that in mind when I begin now. And I'm going to do my best to only have a tiny tail on the end because I need to make sure that I have most of this color to make up my clusters. So here we are. We're going to start in our first chain here. Some people like to chain in the loop in the back, and some people, like me, I just chain into the top loop of the chain. You also could consider doing a foundationless single crochet where you build in the chain in a row of single crochet. It makes this a little sturdier. You could consider that as well. So we're going to join our yarn on, and I'm going to chain 3. This is going to be our first double crochet to build up the side, so our blanket will be nice and straight on the side. Then we're going to skip 2, 1, 2, and we're going to make our first granny cluster. That's 3 double crochet into the same space. Then we're going to skip 2 again, and do our second cluster. Now I have already experimented with this yarn with a swatch, and I know that for me, using a size K hook, 6.5 millimeter, with my gauge and the way that I crochet, I'm gonna have 6 granny clusters for this first color. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, making sure that I skip 2 between each cluster. One, two, three, four, 5. Well, okay. I have quite a bit left over. Will that give me a 6th? Let's see. Well, okay. Well, I'm going to leave this in. I thought about editing and taking this out and redoing it, but I'm just going to lay it out here on the table, literally. This is a new skein from the one I was working on, and it's been quite a while since I made my first swatch of this yarn. And so sometimes when you've stopped on a project and come back to it, your gauge can change if it's been too long between working on the project. So I have 2 options. I can either up the size of my hook so that I only get the 5 clusters like I did on the swatch, or I can go with it that, okay, well, I have 6 now, and that's fine. This last cluster actually only has 2 granny squares, and I am going to leave that like that and count it as the 6th square, or excuse me, cluster, because this allotment of yarn here will not be left out later on in the blanket. It will be available for me to use. Right now, it has to be used for my tail that I weave in, and I have this this chain 3 that's counting to build my side. So further on in the blanket, I will have that yarn to make the 3rd double crochet. So I'm going to be fine with that just having 2. This is where my approach to color pulling is a little different than some people, because I'm fine with it only having 2, because I know that later on in the project it will have its 3rd stitch, and honestly no one is going to notice that it only has 2. The important thing for me as a color puller is that the colors line up correctly and change when they're supposed to. So here we are with our next color. It's more of a fuchsia color. The first one was like a plum color. Now we have like a fuchsia, and on this one, according to my research that I did a couple months ago, I'm supposed to have 9 clusters in this color, so we'll see if I get that 9 or if it is different as well. So let's see, let's get started. 1, 1, 1. All right, so for this one, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And this last double crochet has a little bit more of the purple in it than I am comfortable with. So I'm actually going to tighten up these last about 5 double crochet so that I can kind of squeeze in that stitch without having that purple in it. Okay, there we go. See, I tightened that up, no problem. And now my next color is purple. I did end up getting 10 instead of the original 9. And the next color says 13 clusters, but we'll see if it's 13 or 14. This is exciting. This is how it works in color pulling. I seriously consider just not even showing this and just restarting because it's considered a mistake. But this is the reality of color pulling, that, you know, you have to adjust and make changes. Now, if I was adding on this skein to the blanket that I have already started, that has less clusters, I would be adding extra stitches in these clusters as I go along. Every other one, maybe sneak in an extra stitch here and there to eat up some of the yarn, so that it would join in with the project that I already have going. All right, so here we go on to the purple. Okay, now here I am at the end of the purple, and I have too much left over. I have it enough that it will impact the blue stitches. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to see if I can sneak in a fourth. No, because it will make that blue there in that stitch, so I don't like that. So I'm going to take back again about 5 stitches, 5, maybe 6, and I'm going to stitch a little bit looser on those. Now, some people, I can hear them now. Oh no, you're changing up your gauge. It's going to make your blanket wobbly. I haven't had much issues with my blankets being warped or uneven because of the change in gauge. So I don't know, I live life on the wild side, gonna take the risk. So I did them a little looser, and they ate up the yarn. There we go. So on this next color, this blue color, we're gonna get about 16 stitches or so. We'll see, how many did I get in the purple? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yeah, so I'm getting one more stitch than I did a couple months ago. That's fine. Now I am at the end of my chain that I made, so I'm going to just slip out of here. Loosen that up just a tad. I'm going to put my hook right on back in this chain, and I'm going to chain a few, add a few more on. All right, I'm going to stitch this blue, and I'll see you back in just a minute. All right, so I have finished the blue, and I actually got 18 clusters in the blue, whereas before I only got 16. So that is interesting to note. And now let's get started on our black. This is the final color sequence. Initially, I was able to get 19 clusters plus the one on the second row. It does not matter that the number of clusters is altered. If I continue to have that same number of clusters per color, everything will work out just fine. All right, so I made it to the end of the black, and I have one double crochet here, a little bit left over, and I need to have one of these stitches to be the beginning of the second row here. That's what's going to start my diagonal. So I wanted to see how many clusters I could get in the black before I took one out and started my second row. Let's see what we got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 clusters in this last color in the black. Now I am perfectly fine that there is a little bit extra of the black left over right here, because I do need to build up the side. I need enough to have a chain 3 to build the side of my blanket up before I turn to do the second row. Before I go any farther, because it is kind of in my way here, I'm going to snip off the border color that I've used to make my chain, and then undo some of these stitches that I don't need. I don't need all these. And once I turn this around, I will pull that through to tie it off. But I need to take out one of these because it is, again, going to be the first cluster in my second row. So let's do that, taking out one. Now I'm going to take my hook here and I'm going to chain 3. I need to make sure I do that because it is building up the side of my blanket. And now I'm going to turn and I'm going to make a cluster of double crochets, a granny cluster right here in the first space. Goodness. Okay. There we go. So that worked out great. It used up just the right amount of yarn. Okay. Now farther along in my project, I may or may not need to sneak in a couple of stitches in other areas in order to get that to land correctly. Let me tie off this chain that's left over. In any project, you can make the chain as long as you need to, and then just unravel what you don't need at the end. It's kind of cool. Kind of takes the pressure off. Alrighty, there we go. So that's tied off, ready to go. Now I am going to repeat the same number of stitches per color that I just did all the way until I get to the end. The second row is where you have to go on faith that everything's going to be fine, everything's going to work out great. And then the third row is where the magic happens, where you see your stitches lining up and you see that it is in fact going to color pool. So I am going to stitch my same number of clusters across. In my first color, I'm going to have 6 stitches, the second 10, the third one 14, the fourth color 18, and the last color had 21 stitches. So I'm going to use those same number of stitches throughout this whole second row. All right, now that I'm ready to start my second row, I'm actually going to switch over to an eye hook, 5.5 millimeter. The reason I want to use a smaller hook is because now that I'm on my second row, this row and subsequent rows behind it will use up just a tad more yarn for each cluster because I'm having to go around this stitch here. Whereas before I was just going into a chain, so it wasn't having to go around the stitch. But because it has to go around it, it's going to use up some more yarn. So I need to have a smaller hook so that it will work out correctly with the number of stitches that I have. So here we go. I am going to get started. I'm going to use the same number of stitches for each color that I just used. So that would be 6 in the first color, 10 in the second, 14 in the third color, 18 in the fourth color, and 21 in the fifth color. And I will meet you back at the end so we can begin round 3. At the end of this purple here, I have quite a bit left after I've reached my 14 clusters that I need in this color. So I have the option to either up my hook size for the purple or loosen my tension a little bit for the purple, or I could simply do what I'm gonna do and sneak in a stitch or two here and there in order to use up the rest of that yarn. All right, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I need one more cluster. I like to go back a few and like kind of vary the spaces where I have extra stitches so that it's not all in one space to kind of help even it out. I still have a little bit too much, so I'm going to just loosen these couple of stitches. There are so many people that think you have to completely frog and start all the way over, and that is simply not the case. All right, so now I'm working on the next color, and I'm going to have 18 stitches there. Continue working and adjusting as needed. Again, don't be afraid to put an extra stitch where you might need one or drop one off. It's okay if you have a cluster that only has 2 double crochets in it here and there. It will be fine. We are focusing on getting the same number of clusters per color, and later we'll be focusing on where the colors land. It is important that you have the same number of clusters per color, completely consistent throughout your blanket. I'm going to get going on this blue, and I'll see you back in a minute. All right, I have reached the end of row 2, and I'm at 19 black clusters. That's my final color. I'm looking to make 21. That's how many I had in my first row. Now I'm at the end. I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, again to build the side of my blanket so it's nice and straight. Chain 3 and turn, and I'm going to do 2 more clusters in this black. 20, and then 21 right here. Now, I do have a little bit of extra black. Oh, that's because I didn't do my third one. Never mind. Take that back. All right. Now, I do have my plum color up next, and I'm going to do my 6 clusters of plum, and then I'm going to check for my diagonal. I may have to do some adjusting in order to get the diagonal to work out. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. There we go. Okay. Oops. 5. Okay, so doing 6 clusters here, it will not line up here with the first row. We have our first row, we have our second row, and now we're on the third row, and we want these diagonals to line up. Here's this last color. We want it to be, this is the last plum color. But if I make that the last plum color, I only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clusters in that color. Now, I can decide to alter this color and make it only have 5, or I can take away one of my black clusters so that this plum color is scooted down 1 so that the plum is here, and then that begins the diagonal here. I'm actually going to make that choice because it will be easier to see where the diagonal is in the beginning of the sequence rather than at the end of the sequence. That'll make more sense in just a minute. So I am going to go back, and I have to frog. This is part of color pulling, is frogging. I have to take out this last cluster of black. Now you're probably asking me, Erica, what are you gonna do? You have all that leftover yarn. Well, I am going to frog down and back into my second row, and I'm gonna add, this is enough to make 3 stitches, 3 double crochets. So I'm gonna add an extra double crochet to 3 random clusters in that second row in order to use up that yarn. Now I like to do like every other one so they're not all bulky there together. So I'm going to go back a few. Some of you guys, this is where I lose you with color pulling. You don't like having to go back and adjust the stitches, but trust me, it is worth it in the end, because the project that you end up with, the blanket that you make, is amazing. It looks so good. So I've done 1 extra stitch there. I need to use up enough yarn to do 3 extra double crochets. So let's do an extra one on this one. So that's the second one. Then we'll do a couple just regular 3 double crochet clusters so that they're not all in the same spot. Okay, so this will be my last cluster that uses up an extra stitch. Okay, and then just do 3 Here's the last one on the end. That should be the 19th cluster. If you wanted, you could go back and count. I'm gonna go on faith that I already counted it and it's 19. And do my chain 3 to build my side. And then I'm going to do 1 here. Now I still have quite a bit, so I'm going to do another double crochet there. Good. All right, so we had to do 4 that had an extra cluster. That's okay. Now I'm on my plum, and I know that's where I need to be because I can see here that it is going to be diagonal from this plum. Now, if I had decided to keep that black stitch, then I could look at the end diagonal if I adjusted the plum color. As long as the diagonal lines up either at the beginning or the end, it'll work out great. For me, I prefer looking at the beginning if I can get it to work out that way. So now I'm going to do 6 stitches again in my plum color. Ugh, here we go. 2. 4, here's the 5th, 5, and 6th cluster here. Ooh, I have a little bit of that fuchsia color in my 6th cluster. I can either be okay with it because they're actually pretty close in color, or you can frog back a few stitches, not too many, and tighten up just a tad so that you can use up less yarn and not have any of that fuchsia in your plum. There you go. All right, so now looking at my next color, I see I have a fuchsia here. So the diagonal from that needs to be fuchsia. And because I adjusted that black, it will work out. Now, as I'm going along in this project, I'm going to have to pay attention to these diagonals and the fact that they have to line up. They all should work out perfectly except for the black. Because I took one away in this section of the blanket, I will have to adjust and take one away every time I'm at this end of the blanket. Now it's going to travel diagonally up the blanket as I go along, so it's not always going to be right along the edge. It's going to go in the diagonal as the yarn makes its diagonal. In this part of the blanket where there's black on the other end, I won't have to adjust to 20 stitches. I can keep my 21 because on this end I did not have to adjust to make the stitches. So continue to work. You will see these diagonals land. Make your adjustments. If you get to the end and you have too much, go back and put a few stitches in along your row to use up that yarn so that your diagonals land where they need to be. Now, this yarn is designed to be very consistent. So the colors should land exactly the same and in each skein. Again, if you take time off and come back to it as I did, your attention could change, could be a little off. But again, just make the little adjustments. You're in control. This is your project. No one is going to be inspecting your work, so please do not fret about having a couple extra stitches here or there, or having a cluster that doesn't have quite as many. It's going to be okay. It's going to be beautiful, and you're going to love your project. Thanks for watching, and remember, it's always time for yarn.